Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is 5:30, and I will call this regular meeting of the Burnsville City Council to order. It is our tradition to stand for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, and we invite you to join us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have announcements for our upcoming meetings. Council regular meetings are scheduled for Tuesday, January 7th and Tuesday, January 21st at 5:30 p.m. We have a work session scheduled for Tuesday, January 14th at 5:30 p.m. And our all-day work session is scheduled for Friday, January 31st at 9 a.m. And that meeting will be at the Nicollet Inn in their boardroom. All meetings are held here in the council chambers. The next item on the agenda is citizens' comments. This is the opportunity for anyone in the audience to address the council on an item that is not on the printed agenda and not an application form that will be coming before us at a future date. Is there anyone who wishes to address the council? Anyone? Seeing no one, we will move on. The next item is emergency items only, and this is additions to the final agenda. Ms. Muscoli?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Thank you. Members of the council? Okay, thank you. We now move on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda is a group of items that's considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. However, an item on a consent agenda can be removed for a separate discussion and vote. I do know that we have residents in the audience who wishes item 4R to be pulled, and I'll pull that item for a separate discussion and vote. Ms. Muscoli, are there any items from staff to be pulled?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay, members of the council? Okay, may I have a motion to adopt the balance, please?
Move to approve. Second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay, and the motion carries. Thank you. We now move on to R. And item R is an update to the ends and outcome to remove the proactive property maintenance program from our priorities. And Mr. and Mrs. Huddleston.
Where?
Yeah, and then you can, when you do other things, no, right here, yeah. Okay. So this is where the priority goals for our ends and outcomes for neighborhoods, and at a work session, the city council, the majority of the council asked that the city remove this priority, and you objected to it. So, and you've written a lot of emails too. Ms. Faulkner has seen some of those. Yes.
Say it ain't so.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, and if you give your name and address for the record.
Okay. It's Mike Huddleston and my wife Nancy, and we live at 11625 Rayville Avenue, Burnsville, Minnesota. It's the same address, Vince. We've been there for many years. You know where we're at. And and what else would you need?
Now speaking to the item.
Okay. Yep. Then the reason why we're here is we've lived in Burnsville for since 1993. So, and those of you that follow us on Facebook, we just for us, it was very important. We just paid off our house, and so that was a great feat. They tried to get us to do a second mortgage, and we said no. But so it's a great feat, and so we've been in Burnsville for quite a long time. We've seen a lot of things, a lot of growth, and we've seen a lot of goodness come out of Burnsville. And so we just are concerned that that motion that you guys wanted to work with and vote on wasn't what we thought should be for the city, because we're all in this together, and we go through a lot of neighborhoods, and we know personally every person on our block. There's 20 houses on our block, and we know every person on our block, and they know us. And yeah, we got the cement pond, so the National Night Out, they come and visit us, kind of thing. And so we have a lot of institutional knowledge in the neighborhoods, and what we wanted to do is just talk about, and I told the mayor when we first got here, it's called the broken window syndrome. When you have a broken window and nobody does anything about it, then it becomes the norm, especially ones that see it, and if we walk by it, then we've just set a new standard. And now we're concerned that if we're relying on just citizens of Burnsville to make concern or complaints or whatever we want to call it, there's a lot of them that I call it the Minnesota nice or passive aggressive, and they don't want to what I call rock the boat, and they're probably not going to say anything, even though they know what they're looking at is wrong, and I'm concerned that a lot of things will get missed, and they'll get missed to the point that it'll be too late. Now it's in a different league, different ballpark, and how do we react into it? Those of you that know, and I'll give you an example of, it was a veteran that we helped. He was a hoarder, and he was in Burnsville, and I can just only imagine if we go to like 6 Year or go to a place where somebody can only make a complaint. And the only way we caught this individual, the system caught this individual, was because he had a VA in-home care look at. And if you've ever seen a hoarder house, and Nancy and I have never seen a hoarder house, it was trails up to our waist. And all he was doing was trails to the bathroom and everything. And the moral of the story is that thing got to the point where the neighbors were complaining because they were getting rat infested, and they were complaining that they didn't know what was going on at that house. And I just and I was talking to BJ, and I was saying, BJ, can you imagine waiting a few years for something like that to even, you know, how do you react to a fire to that when you got all that tinder in that house? So, anyways, I know Nancy has got a couple things. I don't know if this is working, but
Yeah, it is. It is.
So why don't you say a couple things that you wanted to say?
I want to say that I want my tax dollars to go for a proactive housing inspection program, exactly like we have right now. And the reason is many of the things that Mike is saying. I think that it provides a safety net for everyone in the city. It's very even-handed. Every part of the city gets a look at every 3 years. No one's being targeted because of the type of housing they live in. It is uniformly applied throughout the city. Yes, there are more complaints coming from the staff because that's their job. That's the nature of your housing stock. You don't have 500 new permits being pulled every year for new housing, new projects. Burnsville's an aging community. I don't know how many permits you have, but it's not for new housing. So their job flips to maintenance. And maintaining the housing helps Burnsville grow. It helps Burnsville be a very welcoming community. It helps neighbors want to help each other. It's as simple as that. And I don't think taking that part of this ordinance out, I liken it to throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It's working well. These people do a hard job. I don't know if any of you have ever gone out on inspections with city staff. I haven't as a resident. I have as a reporter when I worked for the Savage Pacer. They started a code enforcement program. As a story, I went out with this young lady, and it was an eye-opener. They deal with a lot of different things every day. All sorts of things from somebody's parking their RV in the driveway, all the way to Mike's example of a hoarder. And what it all comes down to for me is just a very basic thing that I believe a city should do, is watch out for the safety of our residents. And it starts with something like this. It's something that goes on in the background that we can rely on as residents, as it's a safety net. Just like Mike said, people don't wanna, I don't wanna be that guy. I don't wanna be that gal and call and say, this is going on. And most people won't do it. It's our nature as Minnesotans. We're not gonna do that. So the service that this provides, being proactive versus reactive, is very valuable. And it's a good investment because the other side of it, you guys have been there with that, with the apartments over by the Savage Burnsville border where you had the huge problem, people had to be displaced because there were all sorts of problems there. That costs more money to fix that, to send city staff in there, to get the fire department in there. What if a fire starts? What if, to me, the investment you're making in this program is well worth it. And I'm just here to urge you to keep it because I think it's very worthwhile.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for letting us take some of your valuable time.
Well, and thank you for caring so much about the community and your neighborhood, and also for writing to us about some of the things that you've seen and that you're concerned about, because from your perspective, it's going the other direction if we're not paying attention to it. So thank you for the photographs. Thank you for caring enough to write.
Every morning at 4:30, I'm jogging through South River Hills, so I see everything, that nobody wants to see.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Members of the council, when we had this discussion, this is one of the items that I wasn't in favor of. But I know that the majority of the council wanted for us to just respond to the complaints rather than to have a proactive program for property maintenance. Councilmember Vince Workman.
Thank you, and thank you to the Huddlestons for coming tonight. I've known them since I was in elementary school. I don't think I ever would have thought I'd be seeing them again in this circumstance, but thank you. I don't know if this was in our language previously, but if there was a way that we could do an annual review of this policy change to kind of keep an eye on potential issues that might be arising, did we have any plans of revisiting this?
That would be a council directive.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't think it would hurt to just keep an eye on this, similar to what we've done with our solar ordinance, to catch anything that might be of unintended circumstance or consequence. So I would propose that we just keep this on an annual review until either a change is made or it doesn't seem necessary.
So what do you mean, to just go with the respond to complaints? Or do you want to reestablish the language, the original language that the city proactively canvasses neighborhood checking for?
I'm comfortable proceeding as we've already discussed, but with the review to make sure that this is an ongoing, that we're keeping an eye on this, that we're not just making this change, putting it on a shelf, that we're staying conscious of this decision annually with whether it be staff reports or otherwise, just to see if things are trending in a negative direction or not. Like I said, just to stay conscious of this.
So if it's not a goal, how will staff do that? Thank you. Yeah, I think that was your question.
I
Ms.
pressed my
Faulkner.
button to
Yeah.
ask that question. If the directive is to not do proactive, we won't have anything to monitor and report back. So we just will be responding to complaints, and so I'm not quite sure what your expectation would be when you
Yeah.
want to bring it back amongst yourselves, but we won't have any data to report because we won't be in the field.
We would have the reactive data that would be submitted through the website, and if we're seeing significant spikes of that, if we're seeing major life safety issues, things like that that are popping up that maybe weren't before, we can see trends. I guess I would just rely on the reactive data that we would compile over the next 12 months.
Okay, so staff isn't, so you're not expecting staff to do anything, you're just going to, you just want to see the data?
Yeah, and spot out anything that might be of interest or of larger concern that we had maybe previously not seen as a result of this.
Does that make sense to you, Ms. Faulkner?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, we certainly can report annually on what our complaint activity is. Again, you're relying on others to complain, so it's going to be hard to track. From a staff standpoint, it won't maybe be as objective as maybe you're thinking. We can just report the work that we're doing because that's what we have. And I'm not quite sure in the bigger picture how the ends and outcomes will be changing or framed up for how this would fit into a reporting mechanism to you, but that's a whole nother question.
Okay.
I'll concede for now.
Okay, I'll go to Councilmember Schultz.
Okay. Perhaps to clarify, and perhaps maybe this would be what Councilmember Workman was aiming for. If at each year we have in that report, when you have complaints that come in, if from year to year we start to see a growth in the severity of what is being seen, that is something that council would like to know, rather than numbers. We realize that you would be responding to complaints, but if the complaints that you're responding to are escalating in safety, and a higher percentage of them now are severe in safety, that would be something to draw our attention to. So if we start to see homes where a roof is falling in and this becomes normal, that would be something that we would want to know about. Does that help clarify, or does that sound reasonable?
That's what I was
Closer
going-
to what you were going
Yeah,
for?
and essentially that's what I was.
Okay.
Ms. Muscoli.
Madam Mayor and Council, if that's the direction, I think what I would suggest is we would go back on a staff level, put some criteria in place, and bring it back to the council to make sure that we are reporting back information that you will find helpful. So, just, we can make it happen, but, we'd want to put some thought to it.
Okay. Councilmember Keeley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Question for staff, and staff that's been around a while. I'm curious, how many years did we operate on complaint only before 6 years ago we changed to proactive?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, it predates me, the complaint system. Somebody told me today I've been around a long time, so I'm an old timer. And apparently that's where I fall into, but I'm not that old, right? Or haven't been here that long. It's my understanding this program was in place at least since 1998.
Yeah.
So I started here in 2000, and this was something that was already in place in our building department at the time. So 30 years minus 6, 23 years.
23 years. Thank you.
Yeah.
So
Right.
we operated in, clearly we discovered a very serious problem with a large apartment complex. I don't know of any cases, but staff could correct me on homes, condition of homes, property maintenance that rose to the level of what ended up being our trigger for putting this in place, which was a large apartment complex that was, none of us could believe even existed in our city. It was that bad. And so, that was the real trigger that, I guess it was the straw that broke the camel's back. We decided to go from an idea that I think Councilmember Gustafson proposed years before of rewarding those good players who kept their rental properties in good shape, and to one that was proactive and looking for those that were not so good. I think, it has to be said that we're going from complaint-based to proactive and back to complaint-based because we've gotten ourselves to a certain point. This is separate from the discussion on rental properties, completely separate. Those are a different animal altogether, in my opinion. And so this is going from someone driving around in a city car looking for property maintenance violations. That could be 2-foot grass, it could be garbage cans, it could be siding falling off, it could be a number of things. And so I think we have a mechanism, we have the app, or we have the request tracker, which is not really an app, but it's sort of an app. That a person can anonymously report what they see. So if you see something that is not normal, is not up to the standards, and that you want to report, you're completely anonymous in doing so. I've used it in the past, and I've always done it anonymously, and I've shared it with many friends to report things. And so I think I really like Councilmember Workman's suggestion, because this is a change from where we've been now and gotten comfortable with, and I think we have to try this, and we have to monitor what happens. And so the data of what is reported should be provided to us in a year from now, so we can look at, and we can even compare it. Well, this is, when we were proactive, this is how many issues we dealt with, and when we went complaint for the last year, this is how many calls we got and request trackers, and these are the things that we dealt with. And I think that should also include what staff stumbles on, because when they are out doing the annual proportionate inspection of all the rental properties, they're going to be driving through a lot of neighborhoods, so there's still going to be some visibility of noticing things. And there's no reason, because we're going complaint-based, that a city employee who sees something that is not right is going to just drive by and go, well, nobody complained about it, so I'm just going to let it go, right? They're going to enforce our policies when they see it. So there's still going to be a mix of both going on. And I think we'll find out in a year how well we're doing in this pre-6-year proactive change that we made. And we made that really it wasn't because there was long grass and there was garbage cans showing. We made that decision to go proactive on a completely separate and far more serious issue, and it was Country View Apartments. That's what caused us to go proactive more than anything else. There may have been some council members at the time who said, well, that's good, we'll be able to collect the long grass and the garbage cans and the bad siding in this new initiative with more people being put behind it, but that wasn't why I made that decision. It was because of Country View and a horrible just Skid Row kind of apartment condition for people that we're living in. And we were not going to allow that to go forward, and we were going to make sure that there wasn't any more of those in the city. And we have achieved that goal, mission accomplished. So I'm okay with moving forward with the policy as stated and with the desire by the council, if the majority does so, to track the data, and let's take a look at it in a year.
Councilmember Gustafson.
I have a different perspective on this. I was, of course, here when we started our first rental licensing, which took us a long time to figure out how to put it together. And I agree, Country Village was something that happened that caused us to start charging for rental licenses, because we realized that there were a lot of things, we don't know what we don't know. And if we're not out there looking, we don't know what we're not seeing, and that becomes a problem. And I know the long grass seems kind of silly, and the siding sometimes is intrusive in a way, but if I'm in a neighborhood, when all the houses around me are looking that way, and I just paid off my house and I want to sell it, my property value is not near as much if people drive into that neighborhood and they don't think it's being kept up. I feel sometimes that when we've gone through this, because I was on the other side of this for a while, and I think what had happened is we got very good at our inspections, and I think we got pretty hardcore about it at a while too. We sent out some letters that people didn't particularly like, they didn't respond to nicely, they felt like they were being attacked by the city. But since then, I know that we've made a lot of changes. We discovered issues at the manufactured home. We've changed how we inspect our manufactured homes today because we've discovered that issue. We've discovered issues with our letters. We've softened our letters. I think a softer approach to our inspections is good. It's going to people and saying, you got an issue, we need you to fix this issue. If you can't fix it, if you're having trouble fixing it, get a hold of us. Let's see how we can help you get through this problem so that we can keep our city quality up. And so I'm not really particularly, interested in going back to that complaint base, because I agree with our citizens out here. I don't think a lot of people are going to call and complain. And so all the report we're going to see is the complaints we got, but we're not going to see any reports on what we didn't see out there. You got to remember in the beginning when this whole thing started, we had weed and seed neighborhoods in our city. We had police substations in our apartment buildings. There were a lot of different things that were going on in this city that we had to address, and these were all the steps, slowly but surely, because as a council, we took things in a slow pace to fix things. We found different remedies to do that. And right now, I think the system works good for us. I believe if we continue to work on that, how can we help you approach on our inspections? Our citizens will appreciate it that have the problems, and the citizens that don't have the problems are going to really appreciate it because we're taking care of the business that is done in the city. And so for that reason, I can't support this going back to a complaint base. I'm not comfortable just telling our citizens to tell on each other all the time, and that's where I'm at.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Gustafson. Councilmember Keeley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I just wanted to point out, because Councilmember Gustafson did mention apartments and reference to that, I want to make sure everybody understands that property maintenance, proactive in the residential sense, our neighborhoods, is a completely separate issue than our apartment inspections, which are currently every 3 years, and we're proposing that it goes to every 6 years. And I think I need to restate that, because that gives you the impression that, they're only going to come around once every 6 years. Well, I can hide all kinds of stuff in that 5-year gap, right? They're coming to every apartment complex every year. They're doing 1/6 of the units instead of 1/3 of the units. Correct, Ms. Faulkner?
Madam Mayor, members of the council,
Two
that's
different
the
things.
proposal that's on the regular agenda.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I want to keep this in the right context. Apartment complexes, multi-unit apartment complexes are visited every single year. They're just seeing 1/6 of the rooms or the units instead of 1/3 of the units. So, there's an impact on an owner and a manager when an inspector from the city is coming every year. How many units they do isn't going to determine whether they're going to be a good player or a bad player. I think it actually motivates them to be a good player because we're going to visit them every year. This other proactive property maintenance has to do with residential neighborhoods. And I think we need to do a good job, just like we did up till 6 years ago, of letting people know that there's an anonymous way to say, hey, my neighbor has excessive weeds. Hey, my neighbor's got siding that's falling off and he doesn't seem to be taking care of it. Could the city come out, point it out to him, and handle it? There's no reason for people to hold back when they can speak anonymously. And there's no reason for city staff not to address those calls, go talk to those folks, and point out the fact that they've got a situation that is not compliant with our ordinance. I do not believe by any stretch that moving to this complaint base is going to make this city go backward or deteriorate or have any kind of major property issues. Because I believe this community, it always has, and we've talked about this at every meeting, all-day work session, all situations. Burnsville is filled with residents who care about their city, they care about their property, and they care about their neighborhood. And they don't have a problem calling when they see something wrong and letting PD know, hey, something's going on in the neighborhood, there's a car showing up. Hey, we've got a house that seems to have all kinds of foreign cars coming and going, not sure what's going on there, but can you look into it? There's no reason why that would stop, just because we're not proactively paying city staff to get in a car and drive around the neighborhoods once every 3 years. So I believe in the community. I believe in the number of voices we have. Our PD has said it many times. We have 75 sworn officers, is that correct? Patrolling our city. We have 62,000 sets of eyes that help PD do their job better. That's no different when it comes to inspections. Thank you.
Councilmember Schultz.
I'm glad that there was differentiation voiced in between single-family homes, owner homes, and properties that are rental properties, and that there is a difference on the proposal in how inspections are done, and so that everyone's very clear on how that's done. Looking at the numbers, although just looking from the tracker, they don't have it absolutely delineated between what is a staff-initiated complaint from driving around and what is a citizen-oriented complaint. But looking at the tracker itself, it's fairly clear that Burnsville residents don't have a problem using the tracker to contact the city. It does appear that most people know how to do that and avail themselves of doing that as well when they see a problem. But what I'm particularly pleased about is the number of residents that when you speak with them, what they talk about is instead is if they see an issue or something going on at a neighbor's house, and I have had several residents talk to me about how they had seen something happening at a resident's house. One resident told me they noticed their path up to their house and their driveway was not taken care of, not shoveled, not taken care of. What they did was they contacted their neighbor and checked in on him. Their neighbor is having a pretty rough health issue that they're facing. And so now the neighbors are able to assist them. So what makes me really happy is hearing how often our residents step up and contact each other and say, are you okay? Can I help? When they see something out of character. And I think that speaks well of our city and our residents. But if it is a situation that residents can't resolve amongst one another, that's what we're here for. So contact us, and then, we will send out code enforcement or a city employee, and then that person is going to take the approach of, it looks like something's going on here. How can we help in this situation? What's going on? And I think that that's a much better approach to take for our city. But, we'll keep monitoring it, and we'll look at it over the year. And like all city policies, nothing is ever set in stone. We take a look at it when we've made changes in things. Usually it comes back, we check into it a year from then, 2 years, that type of thing, and say, how are we doing? What way should this be changed, or should it be kept? And that's what we'll do, which is what we do on most every situation. So I will be in favor of this, and we'll take Councilmember Workman. I am also in favor of that. That, like most things, we're going to take a look at it and see where we're at.
Ms. Faulkner, on the proactive program. Can you just help us understand how that happens? So do you have someone who is identified and their function is to drive around the city and identify code, property maintenance codes that are being violated? Because I know some of the letters that I've received have to do with debris piled up on the side of the house, fences that are broken and they need someone to take a look at it, and is it a code violation? Can you please help us understand how the proactive function takes place?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, we have two folks, and Mr. Forsland can correct me if I'm wrong, but we've had two staff people that have worked on it. We've used our consultant to help us out with this, and also one city employee that does this part of their job. So between those two resources, they canvass a third of the city every year and see what they can see from the road. And as Councilmember Schultz noted, those violations are bundled in with the rental inspection violations on the reports. I wish we had a way to separate that out, but we don't. So, and then procedural wise, how we deal with a code complaint, they have to document it. Depending on the severity, they may take a picture. If it was trash cans, we would note it and send out a friendly reminder that we have a little bit different process for. And then we send out our letter, our code correction letter, and we always put on our letters that they can call us if they've got questions. And as you know, we work with a lot of our residents. It's winter, right? So we were talking today about a boat parked on grass that we've got to complain about. Well, we are reasonable, and that boat is not going to move until spring or summer likely, right? So we give people extensions and work with them. And so our map is posted on the website of what neighborhoods that we'll be in, so people know when we're coming or not, those that are interested in that. And then we summarize it at the end of the year. We've been behind at times, and then we've had ability to get caught up again when it's not so busy in the spring and summer with all the weeds and outdoor storage types of things. But that's just a general overview of what we do. We have a pretty well set process for how we deal with complaints and proactive. That process is the same. It just depends on what the source is, where it comes from.
Okay. And when you look at the data that you receive from the proactive program versus complaints, where do you see the numbers?
I'll have to let Mr. Forsland address that. He supervises this area. We don't have the data broken down, so it would just be...
Because I've seen for the regular agenda item, which is for the rental, which is
Right.
different data.
I need to defer to Mr. Forsland on what his thoughts are on that breakdown.
Well, I'm going to try it. Madam Mayor, council members, I'm going to try to answer that. Right now, one of the frustrations we had is when we originally started this program, we weren't parsing out all this data. So, first off, for technological reasons, I'm not a data master, a database master by any means, and we really didn't know that we were gonna need this data in the future. And so we couldn't quite separate some of this stuff out. I think your question here, if I understood it correctly, is
Because you only do a third each year of the city. And so how many, when you're out, how many do you identify through the proactive program, and how many come in as complaint-based?
that would be hard to quantify. We do see a lot when we drive out. And here's a point of clarification here. We have trained inspectors, and that makes a huge difference. Every day I get calls from folks that want to complain about something. Well, it's not a violation. And I have to remind them that. I know you've seen the emails, that it's outside our realm of authority to enforce. And that takes time. So when we see a lot of the request tracker requests come in, it may not really reflect the number of violations and code issues that we see as well. And just to summarize this, 1/3 of the city, we broke it up into 36 sections. And we do 1/3 of those every year. So it's kind of how that works.
I think it might be useful, because I'm with Councilmember Gustafson. We've made progress with what we're doing throughout all of the neighborhoods within a community. I remember there was a time when there were exits from different neighborhoods because of the quality of the properties around there, because they're starting to show age and deterioration, and people weren't taking care of their homes, or there was debris and junk just piled up around the houses. And you can see it from the road. So those are things that I believe the inspectors are able to see, because the policy is, it's what you see from the road and whether it's going to have health or safety impacts.
Exactly.
And so those are the things that you can see from the road. But there are other things that we get complaints about. That's, the neighbor can see to their neighbor's backyard, and where there's a lot of property deterioration.
The request tracker data is somewhat misleading sometimes too,
Yeah.
because I get calls on parking on the city streets. That's a police issue,
Yeah.
especially after hours. So we have to refer them to there. We may receive it, but it's something that we don't have the authority to answer. Another thing with, I think it's important with the proactive program too, when we first formulated this in our mind, we made this plan, is that we wanted, first off, to treat everybody fairly. We wanted to impact the entire city.
Yeah.
And complaint calls we get are sometimes from a lot of the same people on some things. And I appreciate that they're calling these in, but those areas get a lot of focus then. What we really wanted to do was get on every street and see everything we can from the road. That was important that we did that.
Yeah, and I get that, because that's what the discussion was and how we got into the proactive maintenance program. So like Councilmember Gustafson, I'm going to vote against this change. I think there's going to be a split vote of 3-2, so I will want to see how this all plays out. But I understand, because it is about seeing things from the street.
Right.
So that we're looking at the properties and making sure that they are not violating any of the codes that have a health and safety impact to the neighborhood.
Right.
And so, for me, it's, I don't want to see us slide. We're only doing a third every year, so that's every 3 years you're going through the whole city. And you have a method of doing that. So
What we really
I'm
wanted.
concerned about sliding backwards.
Sure.
And going in the wrong direction. Yes, Mr.
What
Forsland?
we really wanted to was for folks to take ownership in it. And it's oftentimes, and I've experienced this, I explain to people, well, if you talk to them, you'd be amazed at the results you can get. And we pride ourselves on working with everybody to try to resolve their issues. We don't always know the whole story, but we
Yeah.
try.
No, and I like the fact that we have a more gentler and kinder letter that goes out that is in everyday layman's speak. And you've taken away all of the government speak out of that, so that's nice. It's gentler, it's kinder, and so I thank you for all of that, because that helps. But we'll see where all of this goes. Councilmember Gustafson.
This may be for the next subject we're gonna talk about, but we did talk about rental housing, which precipitated a lot of things that happened. But we have over 1,000 single-family rentals dispersed throughout our community as well. How do we deal with that inspection?
Sorry.
Mr. Forsland.
You shouldn't have sat down.
Yeah, yeah,
Actually, I think I can answer that when we talk about this.
Okay. I thought it might have been premature,
yeah.
something that.
Yeah, that'll come
I'll
up on
ask
the
it
regular
again.
agenda. Okay. So, council, we've heard from everybody and everyone's thoughts. Somebody wants to make a motion? Councilmember Workman?
I do want to ask our city manager, a follow-up on the comment. If we're going to ask for a one-year review, are you comfortable with that recommendation tonight, or do you want to, you had mentioned you needed to compile what that looks like.
Madam Mayor and council members, I'd want to work with our staff to kind of break it down into maybe more severe violations versus more aesthetic, my terms, nobody else's.
And then
So,
bring it back to a work session?
Sure, we can do that.
Yeah. So
So
that process will come to a work session.
Okay, so if we make that motion tonight, then that's,
Well, if you
That's,
make the motion tonight to remove the proactive property maintenance and direct staff to bring back a process
an
to
annual
evaluate.
review process,
Pardon me?
an annual review process.
Is that a good motion?
That is a fine motion.
Okay, are you wanting to make that motion?
I make that motion.
I will second that motion.
And Councilmember Schultz seconds the motion to remove the proactive property maintenance priority goal from the neighborhood outcomes. And there is a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Nay. And the clerk has a division of the House. Okay, thank you. Now we move on to the regular agenda. And the first item on the regular agenda is a public hearing, and this is to approve an on-sale Sunday on-sale liquor license for Los Grandes LLC, doing business as Los Grandes, located at 251 Burnsville Parkway. Reporting this evening is our city clerk, Mrs. Collins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, City Council. We did get an application from Los Grandes LLC for an on-sale liquor license. This would be for a traditional Mexican restaurant in the former JC Sports Bar location. The issuance of the license will be contingent upon all fees being paid, reviews and inspections being completed, necessary permits and approvals being submitted. An investigation on the principal involved has been completed, and no reason was found to deny issuance of the license. The applicant, Mr. John Sota, is here if you would like to speak to him. This is a public hearing. I stand for any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Collins? Councilmember
Sorry.
Workman, did you?
I was gonna ask the applicant to come up and
Yeah,
talk about this.
when I get to the,
No questions from Ms. Collins.
okay. Okay, no questions. So this is a public hearing, but I'm going to ask Mr. Sorter to please come forward and tell us about your restaurant, your menu, when you will open, and tell us about
Hi, my
what
name is
we're going to
Jonathan.
experience.
My name is Jonathan. Thank you for welcoming to your city.
Yes.
I'm proud to be the owner of, this is the third location.
A third location.
third
So your
location.
other locations are where?
Minneapolis.
Okay,
Minneapolis. And I also have a candy store. We import candy from Mexico, one on Robert Street and the other in Minneapolis as well.
okay.
I started my first business when I was 19 years old. I'm 30. And the Mexican food, it's been popular in the last 10 years. And I've been following my grandma's recipe. And it's been accepted for my other places. So when I found about this opportunity, it's because this investor heard about my place, and then he went to my restaurant he wants to know me and offered me this opportunity to be here. And when I came to see it, it was like my dream right in front of me that I've been working all for this.
Okay. Thank you. Tell us about your menu.
My menu, we serve, like I said, I follow my grandma's recipe
Yeah,
with the seasonings, and we prepare everything more like authentic, like
Okay.
real authentic taste.
okay.
And we're gonna be served like it's a mix of Mexican and American food.
Okay, great. Councilmember Workman.
Welcome to Burnsville. Thank you for choosing to
Thank you.
move your business here.
And I heard, complaints about safety. I want you to guys know that I like to follow the rules. And at my other places, I have a crew of securities, and my head of security, he served 30 years, the police, Minneapolis department, and he's retired, and he's gonna be in charge on this place as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Keely.
Well, echo that, congratulations, and very impressive to be in your first business at 19, and a chain, basically, operation with multiple locations is not an easy business to run.
It's not an easy.
And I'm sure you rely on some really good people that are very loyal and work at your other locations when you're not able to be there every day, right? So
Yes, I have
I'm
83 employees so far.
83.
And
Wow,
it's
that's
like
fantastic.
50 full-times and the rest is part-times. And my goal here is to create about 20 to 25 more. new
Fantastic.
jobs.
Well, that's a big building. It's got a long storied history, and I think the design of the exterior of the building lends itself extremely well to your cuisine coming in.
Like I
And
said, it's like a dream for
yeah,
me.
we look forward to it opening and coming to visit you there and experience your grandmother's recipes. Thank you and congratulations. Welcome to
I
Burnsville.
hope to see you guys all there.
Yeah, just let us know when you're going to open and when you'll have a ribbon cutting, and we'll be there to celebrate with you because Los Grandes belongs in Burnsville.
Thank you.
Yeah. So when are you going to open?
I'm thinking probably the first week of January.
Oh,
Depends how.
that quickly?
Yeah,
Okay,
thinking about the first week of January. First or second week.
okay.
Are you gonna keep those blue lights?
The what?
The blue lights I see under your awnings right now?
We're gonna replace all the lighting because it was kind of dark for the type of business I'm gonna
Yeah,
bring in.
I agree. Good move.
Perfect.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and welcome to Burnsville.
Thank you.
Okay. Members of the council, your pleasure. I will now close the public hearing.
Move to approve?
Second.
Okay,
all
Councilmember
move.
We'll all move
Gustafson.
to approve.
Yeah, Councilmember Gustafson makes a motion, second by Councilmember Keely. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay. And the motion carries. Congratulations. Look forward to your grand opening. Thank you. The next item is the ordinance amendment to Title III, Chapter 20, 30, and 32 related to mobile food vending and the amendment to the fee schedule. Regina Dean, our Assistant Community Development Director, is presenting. Ms. Dean, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. You may remember this item was before you at roundtable on August 13th. It was brought up by a council member. Further direction was to bring it to a council work session, which we did. And city staff went over what our current requirements were. And there was some feedback from the chamber that they wanted maybe some additional outreach, which we did do. And another comment was to hold a public input session at our city council meeting in case anybody wanted to provide you with additional feedback. So just in general, our current requirements for food trucks, we do consider them transient merchants. We do require a background fee of $100. That's a one-year annual fee. It will be increasing with the fee schedule. We do allow food trucks currently in heart of the city on designated streets within parks with the specific park permit. That's a $50 daily fee. In 2019, goes up to $55 in 2020, and then a $500 annual fee. Someone would have to pass the background check and license fee in addition to that. Also, if someone wanted to, let's say, rent a pavilion for a special event like a wedding, they would have to pay the fee for the park shelter, and then also the fee for the food truck should they use it. Should they have that as part of catering, for example. Know that once that food truck is licensed in Burnsville, they can take that anywhere within the boundaries of Burnsville for that year period, as long as they have their background check fee passed. We do allow food trucks currently within any of our industrial, business districts, and mixed districts with approval of a conditional use permit. In our industrial and commercial districts, if catering a private party, a private event, and then we do have exemptions for nonprofit, civic type uses, religious and charitable organizations. We brought back some information about Market Cities, what they do, and their range for fees and process, and where they're allowed. That was presented to you at your work session. And then at your work session, we presented the proposed code changes in the draft format. And there was direction from council at that meeting that there was support for those changes, basically to allow mobile food vendors in all of our zoning districts, and to change our mobile vending fee for food truck type businesses from 1 year to 3 years. And then also with that, because we want to differentiate between kind of your door-to-door peddlers and solicitors, we're proposing to change the fee schedule to designate mobile food vendors to have a 3-year license, and that would be $100. So we did do public outreach after that work session. Well, one, we would consider this public outreach or input. I don't see a lot of people in the audience. We did outreach to the Mobile Food Truck Association. They have over 100 members, and they pushed out information for us. We contacted our Burnsville restaurants. We reached out to Experience Burnsville, and they have information on their website, but they only have phone numbers. So what we did was we went into our building permit data, our alcohol licensing data, and pulled out those contacts, and we were able to reach about 3/4 of the restaurants via email. No response. We reached out to the chamber through this process. We also reached out to our current licensed vendors and our Parks and Recreation contacts. And then we published in the Pioneer Press and Sun this week. We did have opportunity to talk with Experience Burnsville with their executive committee. They did express some concerns with our brick and mortar restaurants, stating that they pay property taxes and that they're generally great supporters of our schools, our nonprofits, and they're really engaged with the community. So they had some concerns about just food trucks in general not being, I would say, connected with Burnsville necessarily, just in general. Of course, there are some food trucks that are in Burnsville, they're Burnsville businesses, maybe they're incubators for future restaurants, so they did acknowledge that. But there was that concern, but in general, they are supportive of the ordinance that's proposed. They see this as an attractor for visitors and a great opportunity to help bolster Burnsville in general. So with that, staff does recommend approval of the ordinance as presented to Title III and to the fee schedule. Certainly, if there's any questions, I'm here to answer.
Councilmember Gustafson.
Just to be clear, this would eliminate the need for a CUP any longer? All right, thank you.
That's correct.
Yeah. Any, Councilmember Keeley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, this is great work. I'm glad we were able to reach out to everybody, generally speaking, based on the feedback and the number of people who didn't apparently object to it and didn't feel they needed to come tonight to speak to us or write about it. I think we're on the right track with really opening up this market, providing what the market is wanting, what people are asking for, and hopefully this will lead to some more activity with food trucks in Burnsville at our events and at places of business who want to have one. And I think it's all good. So thanks very much. Great work, Miss.
You know, yeah. Well, Mrs. Dean, I really appreciate that we reached out to our community, because that's how we do things here in Burnsville. We want everybody to be engaged and to understand what we're doing, because it has an impact on them. And we didn't hear from them, so that says something. One of the things that in this change, because in all of our events, the ones we have in the heart of the city, all have food trucks. The International Festival, 125th Street, I think 125th or 124th, right there by the park, is always lined up with food trucks. and for the International Festival, for the Jazz Fest, and then also when we have Flicks on the Brick or any of those others, there are always food trucks in the heart of the city. But now it's opened up. When someone has a picnic in one of our parks, they can get a food truck if that's how they're going to cater their event. So all of that. But for me, my concern was that we reach out so that our businesses who pay taxes and all of that to the point that experience have a voice, know that they have a voice. So that also signals to the Chamber of Commerce that we did that. It was transparent. So I'm satisfied that we've done all of those things. And Councilmember Gustafson.
Well, I may be premature, but now that I no longer have a food truck and I have a voice in this,
Yes?
I would happy to make the motion to pass this ordinance.
Okay.
Second.
There is a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay, and a motion carries. Thank you so much. Nice work, Mrs. Dean.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
And Regina.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the ordinance amending Title III, Chapter 28 of the Burnsville City Code regarding rental licensing inspection. And Mr. Christopher Forslund, our licensing and code enforcement coordinator, is presenting. Mr. Forslund.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and council members. Again, I think it's prudent right now to just, because some of the conversation I'm sharing, just clarify that our rental inspections are a licensed activity. It's a business regulation versus any other type of proactive enforcement, just so the viewing audience also understood that. So we have some set parameters, our setting code that we need to follow. And I think it's important to remember too, we've kind of segued into some of this, we had some previous discussion that inspections are a core function for our rental licensing program. And they are truly focused on life safety issues. The basis for our code that we use is International Property Maintenance Code, which is one of a family of codes that also dovetail with fire and building code. So very much the same language, but is focused on those particular issues. They provide a standard for livability, and this is a minimal standard. We're not asking people that, what color their walls are. We want a basic standard. And this standard that's set with the Property Maintenance Code is used in 40 states and many, many municipalities. So it's been out there for a long time and it's been recognized. And I think, I think we passed with this council group here. We did adopt this in 2015. The goal here is also to help maintain a vibrant and thriving community, and I hear these words coming up again. These are a lot of the same words that we have in our ins and outcomes. And also maintain some of that stability and quality of the rental dwelling units themselves. And obviously preserve the value of land and buildings. This is, as I've been reminded, is another form of economic development. So people come here, they want to live here, they want to work here, they want to do all these things, so they are related. Country Village. I have this in here because I think it really behooves some further discussion on this. This predates me by about 2 years. And in fact, it was pretty much the first discussion I had when I walked into the building after being hired was, well, what are we going to do with this? We've put this ordinance in place. We need to do these things. And just looking at what I could see in this big stack of records that I got here, I got, oh my God, what did I get myself into? So we had concerns right off the bat on how we were going to resolve it. I think it's important to remind people what those conditions were like if you didn't see these at the time. We had all sorts of problems that border on people could have died there. And was very frustrating when I looked through some of these and realized that these just didn't happen overnight. These were something that would take some time, either through neglect by the landlords, but also tenants not reporting it. Just some really brutal conditions there. The rental license ordinance that was put in place required a 3-year inspection frequency for all rental properties. 3 years is actually pretty typical, and I'll go through that later. It did include single-family rentals, back to your question on that same frequency. It did require a $500 conversion fee for any new rentals that occurred after that date. Anybody up to that time would be grandfathered in as being licensed. And it's also subject to reinspection fees, any adverse license action or citation. We had the tools that we had at the time for non-compliant operators to get the job done. They must attend a crime-free training program and inspected, and this is a key point here, inspected by the fire department annually. Very, very important to note that. Our rental properties, just to put some numbers in perspective, we've got many units in complexes, as you can see there, approaching 8,000. A total of 8,591 at last count. This fluctuates. I think it peaked during the housing crisis, actually, because people were renting their houses more, trying to make up for some of that. But right now, that's about it. It's not including any other additional units that we should be seeing coming into the city. So, thinking ahead on that. Our first couple years, and I got to be real honest with this, were really difficult. And I want to emphasize this strongly. I put this in here. Country Village was a symptom. It wasn't a one-offer. It wasn't that we weren't seeing things in the other structures. We were seeing some very serious things too. It just didn't get really publicly announced as Country Village did. Examples of this: parking decks, garages, that were falling down, damaging cars, and quite a bit of problem. A lot of water mold issues going on non-reported. I think the most frightening thing that we noticed when we got here was missing smoke alarms in the units, in the bedrooms, thousands of them. And this was not necessarily a code requirement at the time. Nobody knew that. Same with carbon monoxide detection, which was a statutory requirement. So we had a lot of different life safety things that nobody knew were an issue. They really didn't, because the codes had changed. We also noted a lot of faulty construction, unpermitted, uninspected work, and these are all life safety things. Doors, windows, missing hardware. If you got to escape your apartment in a hurry, last thing you want to do is have to fumble with the wrong locks and latches. We went through a lot of that in the first couple of years, and certainly damaging, disabled fire control systems. And the chief might touch upon that just a little bit as we go through here. Overall, though, we had a lot of work ahead of us, and we put a lot of hard time into it. One of the comments, these are comments that we received from people as we started the program up. We were out doing the inspections, is that the program levels the playing field. So the one bad apple that you had in the town levels it out for everybody else now, because they're held to the same standard. And that was a comment I guess I hadn't really thought about. Tenants are more likely to rent from inspected structures. They get asked, they ask a lot if it's licensed. Tenants feel safer. I think that's the goal of the whole program, part of it, and are safer. Landlords reinvest back in their properties and made them more desirable. And this one I really enjoyed, because he was also a landlord, was it's easier to sell a home that's been inspected regularly too. They don't have the problems that we see. So if it was a rental and they wanted to sell it, they had that documentation that take a look at that. I think it's important to know that despite our efforts, a lot of these concerns continue to today. And I think in my background, I'm paraphrasing a lot of the information that I provided in the background in here. Housing, rentals in particular, are like a living being. I mean, once the last nail is pounded, they're going to slowly decline. And just like us, we need regular maintenance. We need to go to the doctor. We need to do those kind of things to keep them so they're safe and healthy. Turnover of tenants and property managers compounds the situation. Just when we think we've got a property manager that we worked with for the last year, on, yep, you can't walk by the missing fire exit sign or disabled fire door, and we have to teach them over again. This is what we need to do. Fire department runs into that. We run into it with the same with the managers when they go in with us to check the units and take a look. The managers actually do like to do these inspections because that gives them some separation from coming in and being the bad guy. It's the city doing this. And they do like to get a lot of them done at once because then they can order all the same supplies and set time aside to do it. So from a cost effectiveness, they like the inspections. That's what we've heard. Some of the other problems, many of the multifamily structures are unsprinklered. So we have to really, we're also eyes as well for the fire department when we're in the units that they don't disable them, they don't do a lot of different things or block them, for example, with the unsprinklered. But it's still a problem for all of us from the safety perspective. And many of the structures here are nearly 50 years old now. So time, like all of us, is creeping up on the structures too, and they're showing it. And to emphasize this over and over, fire is the highest hazard for residents in multifamilies. I do not want to read about Burnsville.
Yeah, like
I want to take the burn out of Burnsville, just like Chief does, and don't want to read about it like Minneapolis and New Brighton. We can do better than that. Chief's going to talk a little bit about the data he's collected.
Welcome, Chief, and thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Great background and from your perspective and your vantage point.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Thanks for the opportunity tonight to give kind of a fire perspective of this this issue. And unfortunately, I was here for Country Village. I was new as the fire chief here, if you recall. And Country Village really opened our eyes. We actually had a fire there, and that's kind of what started the ball rolling on some of this, is we had a kitchen fire where the family couldn't get out. And I remember arriving on that scene and watching our crews pull a mother and a child out of the window because they couldn't get out because the door had a double keyed lock and there was no working smoke alarm in that entire building. And so as much as Country Village was an issue back in 2011, we have a lot of the same challenges today that we continue to try to stay up on. Multifamily dwellings are definitely our highest hazard in this town. From a life safety perspective, from a fire perspective, I worry most about the multifamily dwellings we have. The infrastructure is old. The majority of them do not have fire sprinkler systems. They were built under a code that did not require them. Most of their fire alarm systems are not required to be monitored, so until their fire alarm system breaks to the point they can't find parts, it does not have to be monitored by a central monitoring system. So if the alarm goes off, we are not notified until someone on that premise calls 911. So there's a delay in the fire department getting notified in many of these cases. We continue to have issues with exit doors and other fire features. Mr. Forsland talked about us sending fire inspectors into the common areas every year, and it's amazing what you'd find in the common areas with just exit doors, exit pathways, maintaining fire corridors, utility rooms, things that are important to the life safety and exit of those occupants in the event there is a fire. So you pile that with the lean staffing model that we operate and the experience that we have. You know, we've experienced significant fires in these types of facilities, and we've displaced a number of people. And I've been on the majority of these fires at 2 o'clock in the morning when we're moving 36 units out, you know, and unfortunately in this case, one's actions of that building affect many others. You know, unlike a single family, there's a kitchen fire in a building in one unit that affects that entire building. You know, usually we can get it down to the one wing that's displaced, but you're still affecting more than just one occupancy when we have these. So the data you see in front of you is some research that I did, and actually our case example is used as a teaching example at the National Fire Academy of how we've implemented the 5 E's of risk reduction, as I pointed out in the background. So we've hit all 5 of those E's as a very strategic and comprehensive approach to risk reduction. So here it shows prior to when we implemented the rental housing and we got the FEMA grant for the stovetop fire stops, the DVDs, and the smoking butt containers. So from 2004 to 2011, is the bottom bars you see there. The blue is the civilian fatalities. You know, knock on wood, those are few and far between, so it's tough to really compare apples to apples there. But the yellow is the civilian injuries. So from 2004 to 2011, we were averaging 3.25 civilian injuries just in multifamily dwellings per year, and 1.25 firefighter injuries per year. So not only were we injuring civilians, we're injuring our own staff, many of those being debilitating and career-ending. Then you look from 2012 to 2016 on average, civilian injuries went down to 1 per year, and firefighter injuries went down to 0.4. A dramatic decrease in just injuries to both civilians and firefighters. So I'm proud of the work we've done. I think it's significant and it's very impactful. And we continue to see a similar trend today because of the work that we do on this. Then if you want to look at it from a pre and post grant, the fire dollar loss. So 2004 to 2011, on average, we had the yellow bar down there is property loss, so close to $1.4 million per year in property loss, and just over $600,000 in contents loss per year. So on average, we're roughly $2 million of fire damage loss. This is only from fire damage, estimated loss. And then 2012 to 2016, you're looking at significantly less, about $450,000 in property and about $75,000 of contents loss. So again, you're looking at less than $600,000 loss. So, you know, a threefold decrease in dollar value loss to these properties. Like I said, it's been a very strategic and planful approach to make sure that we approach this from many angles. We work very closely with code enforcement and police to make this work well. Today, I hate to say it, but we still have 1 to 2 complexes always on our radar that are taking up a lot of staff time to keep them up to date, that aren't far from Country Village, but don't make the paper like Country Village. Significant issues at 1 to 2 complexes all the time. From a fire perspective, there's significant issues, and unfortunately, it seems like when we get 1 or 2 under control, the next 1 or 2 pop up, and they're one after another. And until we get to the point where we're ready to you know, take license actions, they won't make any changes. So we continue this cycle of trying to keep these older properties, maintain that so that they're safe for the residents there. And, you know, Mr. Forsman talked about it, not only the tenants change over, but the maintenance and the managers. For us, the maintenance is just as important as the managers, because they're the ones that need to fix it and see the doorways and see all those things that are important. So it's important, and we rely on the code enforcement folks to get in those units, because that's where the majority of those fires start. The fire department works on the exit corridors and the technical building features that we're worried about to make sure it's a safe building for these people. Code enforcement lots of times will recognize things like the smoke alarms are not working, or that we have a heavy fire content load, or things that are dangerous in the units themselves. So this proactive approach in multifamily between fire and code has been very effective, and I would hate to see us slide backwards and experience what we were experiencing when I got here as fire chief. And I want to make sure that we stay on a path to keeping the community and our firefighters safe. So thanks for taking my comments, and I'll turn it back over to Mr. Forsley.
Yeah, I think just stay there for both you and Mr. Forsley, Councilmember Schultz.
I have a question. Do you believe that the proposal that we are discussing is eliminating proactive inspections for rental properties? Is that your impression?
Madam Mayor, as a council, I know it does not eliminate proactive. It elongates the inspections of those units, which it concerns me of the efficacy of the program if we go that far out, is my concern.
Okay. Councilmember Gustafson.
You mentioned that we have a couple of buildings that are on the fringe right now.
Always.
I remember, because I was here during Country Village as well, and one of the things we had an issue with the owners was they weren't cooperating with us in any way whatsoever. In fact, they fought us pretty much every step of the way. How are these other buildings reacting to us when we go in and talk to them about the issues that they have?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I'll speak from our perspective. Mr. Forsman wants to talk to it too. What I can tell you is that we write up violations. We end up going back, re-inspecting, writing up second violations. And until we get to the point where we get the regional manager, and generally the regional manager doesn't get it fixed, at some point you're flying people in from the investment firm that actually owns it, and it takes till that point that you get some action. But I would tell you that that seems to be very limited, and it's this constant process. When you have these properties that are just barely making it, it seems like they do just enough so that they fix a couple of things, and then you gotta go through that same process to get them to fix the rest of the stuff. And it's this consistent process of pulling teeth with these folks to invest enough money in their property to get it up to the expectation of the code and to make it safe. So it's, unfortunately, until you get up to the higher levels, most of these managers and regional managers don't have the authority and are hamstrung until it gets to the point where there's almost license action before they take it, before the ownership will take it seriously.
And license actions where you get the newspaper report.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, another phenomenon related to that too is we've had a lot of the larger complexes also change hands.
Yeah.
And we find ourselves almost starting over again with re-educating and saying, hey, here's how we do things here. This is our expectations. We're re-educating constantly, whether it be the managers, whether it be the new owners, or all the related parties. So we do have setbacks. A lot of the problems that Chief's referring to too are those that can be sometimes immediately corrected. And one of my favorite ones is accumulating combustibles at the garbage chutes, which just, one day it'll be fine, the next day it's not, it's reoccurring. And we do have problems with things like that. We have to constantly monitor that they're doing the safe things with what resources we have in time. It's a battle. It hasn't ended yet. It didn't just end with Country Village. It's continuous.
Okay. Councilmember Keeley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A couple questions for both of you, sort of. I noted in your report that the fire department only inspects common areas. So currently, the fire department does not inspect individual units.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, that is correct. We inspect the common areas, which includes the hallways, the utility rooms, the trash chute, the trash rooms, all those kinds of things that generally are a little more technical in nature, and then code enforcement gets into the units.
Before, and this is another one of those historical questions, before proactive rental inspections, were any rental units inspected by the city staff or the fire department prior to 6 years ago? Were they ever inspected inside?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I would have to go look. I know there was some fire inspection component on the regularity. Some of it might have been complaint based. I don't know for sure. I know we were in those buildings as needed, but I don't think there was a program per se.
Would it be safe to say that prior to our proactive ordinance going into place, the reason that a country village happened is we did no internal inspections unless there was a complaint or a fire drew you in, which, as you noted, country village was a fire that caused the Pandora's box to open up, and we found all kinds of horrible conditions inside. I can't imagine if we were doing any kind of inspections, country village would have never gotten to the point that it was.
Yeah.
So for decades, we did no inspections.
That's right.
Then we went to inspections every 3 years of every unit, right? It's quite a dramatic shift from nothing to every 3 years. I'm curious, Mr. Forsland, you mentioned that multi-tenant structure owners who really like us to come in and do their job for them. Do we charge those owners to do the work that they should have done on their own to maintain the properties to the code?
We charge a license fee and if necessary, a reinspection fee. But it's also important to remember that the codes have changed. We're trained inspectors. All my folks are certified. We see things they may not know about. That's our opportunity to teach them, yeah, you gotta check those smokes. Those are a priority. That means people are gonna get out. That means firefighters aren't gonna burn up in a fire they're fighting. It's important, and I think that's really hit home with a lot of them.
Sure. Your comment was interesting to me because it's, I don't respect a property owner or manager who basically doesn't do their job maintaining their property to the local ordinances and actually welcomes the city coming in, playing the bad guy to help them do their job.
Sure.
I think they ought to be charged for it. I don't think they should get off scot-free for us to come in and do their job for them. I think we ought to charge them up front for it. And not just a reinspection fee, because they're the ones who are delinquent in their responsibility, and we end up coming in and helping them point out the fact that they weren't doing their job. They weren't a responsible property owner.
And sometimes they don't know that. That would be the only caveat
I'm sure there's
to
some that are pleading ignorance.
There is, but I'm certainly not in a position to sort out who's pleading ignorance and who's not.
No. One other question for Chief. If we had a stronger enforcement leverage to get the owners to respond and fixed more promptly, would you spend a lot less time on those? For example, the two properties that you brought up where it's, you know, they'll do a little and then you have to keep going. It does imply that our staff spends an excessive amount of time trying to get somebody to do what they were supposed to do the first time we came through and said, this is what is wrong, fix it. And it seems to me like in those situations, maybe we're a little too nice and too patient, and we're dragging it out, and we're spending an inordinate amount of staff time, which is costing us a lot of money, right, the staff, on these poor performers. And they're dragging their feet, and they're just doing the minimum, and they're only doing a few things. And I mean, it's almost like Country Village, only on a different scale, where Country Village just flat out didn't do anything, and then drug their feet, and then did a few Band-Aids, and then, you know, but I just wonder if we have an inadequate enforcement policy and position, and that we should be flexing or shortening our timeline and putting out that you're gonna lose your license and everybody's gonna get deferred if you don't get these things done. Because if it's life-threatening, why are we working with them over a long period of time, trying to encourage them nicely to do their job? I mean, this is a little bit of what I think put us in the position with Country Village, where in that case, we weren't even doing any inspections. And now we're doing inspections every 3 years, and we still got some bad players, and they're sucking up way too much staff time. Because alternatively, we have some very good players. We have great property owners that take pride in their property. That if you find something, they're almost embarrassed about it, they get it fixed right away. Those are the ones that should be rewarded, and these others, I think we need to be a little more aggressive in bringing the hammer down, because they are the ones that are giving us a bad name when people come and live there and there's problems and they just never seem to get resolved, right? Even with the city coming in and you coming in and inspections, they still drag out for, what, several months? I don't know how long some of these have been going on, but it seems to me like we got an enforcement policy problem that needs to help you do your job more, and less about, maybe not less about, I understand your perspective on trying to maintain it 3 years, and that seems to be the norm, as I've done some research in other cities around the country, just looking through their fire inspections or building inspections type of thing. So I think there's something we need to take on is maybe we need to strengthen and shorten the time that we are getting these bad players to clean up their act, right, before we bring down a little heavier enforcement. Because like I said, there's no excuse for it. Once you go in and you bring out these issues, they need to be resolved, period. These people that own these large complexes aren't poor people. They have no financial excuse whatsoever. These things should be resolved right away, period, end, to the safety of their own occupants. Thank you.
Okay, Chief, I think there were 2 or 3 questions that were asked.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I'm not sure I'll capture all that. I'll try to. What I would tell you is that if it's an immediate danger to the occupants, we will deal with it right then and there. So for instance, if the fire alarm system does not work, they get put on fire watch right away, and it needs to get fixed immediately. If an exit door does not work, it needs to get fixed immediately. There's some things that are absolute life safety. If it's exit signs or the door doesn't close all the way, they get time on some of those. So it's trying to base it based on the risk and work with people. I don't know of a place that has an effective tool, otherwise I'd be suggesting that to us. You know, I think we could do some more research. I know speaking to my peers in other communities that have similar aged, buildings like ours, have a lot of the same challenges with the turnover of ownership and management. I mean, frankly, some of these managers are turning over as fast as these occupants are, and aren't given the authority to fix some of these. While it would be nice if they had the authority and they took, were able to fix these things more rapidly, it would definitely help the efficiency of our staff and allow them time to get some of the other things done that we have prioritized for them. I just don't know of a much better effective enforcement tool. Not saying there's not one out there, I'm just not aware of one, I think we've taken some steps forward. We could, we continue to look for some of those things, but I think even having the across the board licensing program we had compared to 8 years ago is a night and day difference too. Because it was voluntary, although we had a handful of good actors that were really engaged in the community, there were a lot of sleeping ducks that we didn't necessarily know about, and those are the ones that are pedaling below the water that we're finding now, that continue to kind of be that repetition. So unfortunately, it's more than a few. If it was just a few, I think I would have a different stance and we'd probably take a different approach, but I would say given the age of our infrastructure, it's actually quite a few in the community. So
There are two others, but I just want some clarification because right after Country Village, the property north of Vista View School, we needed to dislocate some of those occupants as well so that the building could be, or did we just moved a few out, but it needed to be renovated and also because it was infested. If you remember, there were all kinds of infestation in the building.
Mayor, members of the council, I think you're talking about Riverwoods. It used to be Charleswood.
Yes,
I think that's
Charles-
what it's called.
yes.
I know they were remodeling. I don't remember the reason they were remodeling. I can't recall that, but I do remember that they were remodeling, and I know there was a timing piece that we were hoping they'd be able to relocate.
Yeah.
Some of those
people.
displaced residents, because I remember there were a lot of moving parts to that of
Yep.
displacing kids from schools and, being able to have first and last month's rent. And, I remember we were working with nonprofits in the county and a lot of people to try to help these folks gracefully get land somewhere. And it took a lot to do that, but.
But it's a nice looking property now, but for the work that we did and what they were doing helped in that regard. I'm going to go around, but I also have questions for you both. Councilmember Schultz.
I also was interested in the comments that were by either rental managers or owners. And my question is, if we went to whatever year that is, because these all units, the buildings are going to be inspected yearly, regardless. It's just whether 1/6 of them are inspected by code enforcement yearly or 1/3 of them are inspected by code enforcement on the interior yearly. So my question is, while we can make a bottom number mandatory, we can make any number voluntary for a fee. So if an apartment manager wishes to have a yearly inspection of all of their units, is that something that we could make available for a fee?
You can make anything available for a fee.
Well,
We already
workload.
offer some of that too. We've got some of the smaller complexes where initially we said, hey, do you want to do this all in one shot? And some choose to do that.
Absolutely.
We still meet that inspection frequency of once every 3 years. But the vast majority of them would prefer that we do 1/3. It just helps them also keep track. Do one floor a year, something similar.
But if an apartment building wished to use that, say, as a competitive edge, since you say tenants also prefer this, they like to know that it's inspected, then that might be something that is offered. That way, no matter what we set as a minimum, people can absolutely go above and beyond on that.
Anything's possible.
Would that work, though, for your workload? I don't want to propose something.
The workload is, as we've tried to, I guess, educate a little bit here on this, will fluctuate greatly. Honestly, depending from the manager. We have managers out there that take this to heart. They've been in other cities. They know what we're looking for. They're prepared for they get there. My pet peeve is not having your keys ready.
Yeah, I bet it is.
Yeah, and those are the kind of things that we don't have issues with. That person leaves, I get somebody who's never done it before, has not done their pre-inspections. I mean, that ultimately drives how much time we spend on things. Back to the prior question about enforcement process. We've got several large issues in town. Not only are they huge in capital, it's one of those, we're getting to the point in some of these structures where how much longer do we keep them standing? We can put Band-Aids on, we can plaster them up, we can do all these different things. Our issue is, at that point, they're code compliant. We can't make them tear them down unless they're creating an imminent life safety issue. So we run into this wall where at this date and time, you're code compliant. Next week, when something else cracks and falls into the parking lot, we have another issue again. So it's kind of you're chasing your tail with some of them. Where do we go from there? Good question. I guess it's, how much money does the city want to spend litigating it?
Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Workman.
Thank you. If I'm getting ahead of it, can you speak to single-family home rentals? Or were you going to talk about that? Because I know you mentioned
Yes, I
that.
was.
So then I can wait until you get to that, and then I'll ask my questions after that.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what I have in the rest of here. I may not address that specifically. The single-family homes are even more difficult.
Yeah.
There seems to be this perception out there that they're easier for us. They're smaller, but they have to meet the same criteria. And what we've got here, are normally property owners who have never been involved in a property management business, who have never done it before. And unfortunately, we've had some really tough examples of, literally the, oh my God, people are living in there type thing, where we've had to literally, no, you're not gonna get licensed and nobody will be living here right now until you get these repairs done. We have more problems on a smaller level with the single families. They are, and they change as well. We've had, and I think everybody's aware of this, an influx of a lot of rental management companies that are buying up a lot of the small ones. So they may be corporate, but they're single family. Sometimes that's hit and miss too. They don't do their own repairs. They got a contract out. My frustration more is from the building code side, where homeowners will not, or have installed over the years, inherently dangerous things when we look at it. And it's quite a challenge. So that's my answer on single families.
Can I ask a follow-up? How many single-family households do you think are in Burnsville that are being rented but aren't licensed?
Oh. We'll go.
I know that's a hard question to ask.
That's
I'm not trying
to
pigeonhole you or anything, but I mean.
I'm gonna go by what the other cities I've worked in experience. We probably get about 80% of them.
Okay.
And sometimes it's, we get a call from a tenant, hey, my landlord's not doing this. And, address. Oh, well, are you aware you don't have a rental address or a rental license? Oh, no. Because people don't think to ask that. And then we end up with a whole nother situation. It happens more often than you think.
So that actually leads me to my next question is, what is our procedure when we find single-family homes that are being used as rentals but aren't licensed? I mean, what is the procedure there?
Well, we'll send them our friendly 30-day letter, because that's provided in code that they need to get properly licensed. If it's been unlicensed, it's probably gonna be a conversion fee of $500, subject to inspection. Most people comply.
Generally speaking, a lot of your single-family homes are just people that have purchased property and are using this as an investment or
Yep.
something else, and if the less they have to invest in it to make
Well-
it nice, you know, the more profit.
That's what I
That's
thought
not
too.
everybody, but,
That's what I thought too, but a lot of them are being bought up by professional,
Yeah.
rental companies
Yeah.
as well. Granted, there's still a lot of single families that are being rented out there by an owner that lives out, out of town or adjacent. I believe we even have one who rented from Guam. Yeah, go figure that one. But we do see them out there, but the rental scape has somewhat shifted, especially with the housing crisis moving around.
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask one more question.
Okay.
So, are the rental companies typically more of the problem than the individual in your experience? Have you seen?
I don't think so, because they get it, and some of them do have resources. Hey, I'll have my handyman come over, he's a contractor, he'll repair the ductwork on the hot water heater. Great, pull a permit, we'll be looking for it, those kind of things. Mom and pops, oh, do I need a permit for that? Well, I put this in 10 years ago, isn't it grandfathered in? No, it's not, it's dangerous. And that's what kind of thing's difference. I mean, everyone is different. You open up the door, well, other than the dog might be coming out at you, open up the door, you don't know what you're gonna expect till you get inside.
Okay. And the reason I ask all of this is because it kind of relates back to the proactive versus reactive. And what I have noticed is that a lot of you obviously have a lot more knowledge on this than I do, but it seems like the homes that have the most violations tend to be tenant-occupied homes, as opposed to owner-occupied homes.
Well, that's part of our licensing. They can't, if they're owner occupied, they don't need a license.
Yep.
Is that your
Right,
question?
but to the code enforcement and the things that we talked about previous to this, from what I have seen, it seems like a lot of those problem homes the majority are not owner-occupied. And again, I don't have the data that you have, but just
I'd
from.
have to look at that to give an answer on that. I mean, we're in the
This is
rental units.
speculation, but
Yeah.
it feels that way,
You
so,
never know what's behind the door.
sure. Thank you.
Councilmember Keely.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think part of this discussion, we need to recognize that there are a lot of good property owners out there that have very little to no violations. And I think what I'm trying to get to is, lay off of the good property owners and focus our attention on those that are problems, which it sounds like you're spending an inordinate amount of time on already, to my point about enforcement. I'm wondering if we, instead of making everybody the same by having every 3 years, everybody, whether you're literally error-free or violation-free, or you get one, oops, this battery need to be changed, versus the ones that are significantly worse. Could we go to a longer cycle, but when you are inside a building and inspecting units and you find multiple violations, that triggers an additional units? In other words, if you're going in to do 1/6, you end up doing maybe half because you continue to find more and more violations. And so your attention and time is invested in the buildings with the problems, and not having to go through buildings that really don't have hardly any problems.
Well,
Do we
try
have
to
buildings?
answer that. I'll try hard to answer that. If we're gonna look at multifamilies, it's a rare day we're gonna find anything that has no violations in it. That's just, like I said, our infrastructure, our housing is aging here. It's like my body. As we age, we're gonna have more things wrong with us. We're seeing the same things. What we didn't see last week may be there again next week, especially with a lot of the fire stuff. We're obviously concerned for imminent life safety issues when you're I hate to say good owners, because they're all good. They just may not recognize things in the same sense that we would see things too, or place emphasis on it. It's not my pet peeve. It's important to me is that when staff walk in, if at all possible, when they leave that unit, that smoke alarm is working. Whether we hand them a battery,
Yeah.
whether we hand them a smoke detector, which we do carry extras
With a
with.
carbon.
I wanna go home at night and know
Carbon
people are gonna be safe there, and that my buddies in the fire department aren't gonna have to go in there any more than they have to. That could happen with the best. I mean, people are people, and that's, you know, that's what happens in reality, is some days you have good days, some days you have bad days. Same with good owners. We don't know.
Could you follow up, Madam Mayor?
Okay, sure.
Could we see the data? I'd really like to make a decision based on, and you've provided a lot of data. I certainly get the fire part. I think we're dealing with a sort of a fuzzy picture of what is the total inventory and what is the spectrum of good and bad players. Because I don't really know. And, you know, the discussion clearly focuses around the problem, the aged, that are chronic problems that you go into, and there's always lots of stuff. But it's hard for me to accept that that's the case 100% of our multi-unit rental properties. And that, I mean, I guess I'd like to see, and I'm okay even suggesting, since I brought this up, delaying this to gather more data to make a decision. But what I'm really trying to find is a scale of inspections that is heavier on the problem units and less frequent on the ones that aren't a problem. Because again, we're saying everybody gets 3-year inspection. Well, if we have units or owners that rarely have any problems, why are we going every 3 years and doing a third of their units? Maybe we should be going in every year on the really bad units. I mean, the really bad players, the bad buildings, maybe we should be going in there more frequent than every 3 years of a third of their unit. We're going in every year, but doing a third.
30%.
Maybe it should be more aggressive there and less. So
Indirectly, we may be, because we're more likely to get complaints on those.
sure.
But again, those are complaint-based. We're gonna go to a single unit. We don't get a full reading of how this is operating until we do the entire thing.
Right.
And we're looking at component systems too. We're looking at heating, for example, that affect multiple people sometimes become violations. So there's no one set size. And how do you define good?
Well, there's probably, I'm
saying?
gathering that there's probably some wide disparity between how many a particular complex over the last 6 years, how many violations they've had versus your worst situation.
Yeah, that'd be interesting to look at.
That's the data I think we need, because we're trying to make this 3-year one-size-fit-all, and I think it's penalizing the good players, and it's probably not aggressive enough for the bad ones.
Okay, I'm going to go to Councilmember Gustafson.
When we do the inspections, are those scheduled?
Yes,
And are the tenants notified you'll be going into their apartments to inspect?
absolutely.
And
We
so-
don't go in if they're not.
And so if you get there and you find some other problems, you just can't go into another apartment.
We don't, we have the landlord, we try as best we can to keep track of which ones we've been in. And oftentimes they call us up because they can't remember which ones we did.
Okay.
So we have a record of that, so we can ensure that we get as close to 1/3 as we can.
I think tonight's conversation's been a really good conversation. It's been a interesting conversation of some of the things that we do for the owners of these buildings. And I know that we have our multi-tenant associations and our police departments involved. Everybody's involved in a lot of different things working with the
Team
tenants.
effort.
It's a team effort. And I believe that we could probably sit down and take a part of a work session and really kind of hone in. How can we do a better policy for you guys to kind of get to the root of this thing? But the main core issue here, in my mind, is the safety of 20,000 renters that we have in this city. And what are they living in? Are they in safety issues? Do they have problems that we don't know about yet? And I hear what you're saying, but to go to an apartment 1 year and then 5, 6 years later go back into that apartment, especially if that apartment was on the fringe, but not enough for a violation, in 5 years, that apartment could be in pretty bad shape.
I think,
We watch buildings transition pretty quickly around here, and I mean, I'm in the business, so I get around as well, and I see things happen that it's, I mean, even the country village is not exactly totally up to what we were hoping it was gonna be. And that got a lot of emphasis from us.
Right, I think there was some data that generated, or we found where the average turnover of a rental unit in the United States is like, a tenant will be there 3 years.
Yeah.
And then there'll be the manager's about every 2.5 years. So, you know, these are all confounding factors. And when we start working behavioral issues in, that makes it even more difficult. Some people's standard is not my standard, and it certainly isn't the code standard. And that can vary. I mean, we don't know. That's the thing.
Thank you.
Councilmember Schultz?
Yeah, I'm also more interested in more information on that because towards the beginning of the presentation, it was talked about a couple are nearing, where they have serious problems and it's taking quite a bit of staff time and they may be dragging their feet on that. But then later, it sounded like there was quite a few buildings that are in that situation. So I feel less clear after the conversation than at the beginning. So I'm hoping we can get some more information on where are our apartment buildings at. So, yeah, I would be in favor of getting more information on that for sure. And it is an interesting choice of words to say what we're doing for our managers and our owners, because this is something, and I also agree with Councilmember Keeley, that it appears that we are taking over some of the workload that a manager should be taking, which is inspecting their own units and understanding what is going on there. I understand the challenges of it, and I understand the educational component of it. I also like that we would be a partner with that. But that is an interesting way to put it.
I see where you're going on this now. There will be instances where we walk in fact, it happened just a few weeks ago. We send staff out, we assign, we give notice, we have them, give at least one maintenance person, because we always go accompanied, we never go alone with us. They, for the most part, had not done their pre-inspections, which we ask everybody to do. This is their opportunity to show us you're a good operator.
Yeah.
And we're unprepared. We're not gonna, we're done at that point. If you're not ready for us, let us know when you're ready.
Right.
We're not gonna waste any more staff time here until you're ready. This is your opportunity to show us what you can do. So that does happen.
And I am sure it does.
It does.
And if I may.
Sure.
So my question is, when they say that the average turnover is at 2.5 or 3 years for a tenant, the information I would be looking for as well is the feasibility of inspection at turnover.
Well,
I know, right?
That's,
Right?
probably not possible with,
Yeah,
I
that's
believe
a lot of
Mr.
work.
Gustafson mentioned 20,000 rental units in
Yeah.
town.
yeah.
And back to looking at the scope.
And the reason why I ask that is that is the point in time when a landlord is most likely to make significant changes in a unit,
I do.
is at that point. And, yep, I understand on the workload and that type of thing. Actually, I don't understand the workload, which is why I'm asking. But is that something that we could take a look at? Because if it's completely unfeasible, it's completely unfeasible. If it's something where it's feasible and a landlord wants to do that and they're willing to pay for that type of service.
It's on occasion, we'll run into units that are in turnover. They're empty.
Yeah.
They may be painting. Actually, this is a good opportunity for us. This is a good opportunity to say,
Right.
hey, where's your permit for all the plumbing you're replacing, for one thing? Yes, this is important stuff to do too. Make sure we do this. This is what the code will say now. This is what you need to have. It's actually an opportunity.
Yeah.
And we do look at those as part of the regular, just through serendipity. It's open, we'll look at it. Does that kind of answer it?
Because it would be, yeah, somewhat. Because if we're inspecting 1/3 of the apartments each year, we could still inspect 1/3 of the apartments each year if the turnover is every 3 years. The thing would just be coordinating the efforts between, how we would coordinate the efforts between scheduled times that they're leaving the apartments between the different buildings. That sounds like more of an IT issue
Yeah.
than a man-hour issue.
I'm gonna go to Chief.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I'd be a little concerned about just doing it on turnover. The majority of our fires are caused by unintentional and accidental fires, and a lot of that, catching the smoke alarm not working lots of times can be a tenant issue of taking that down, or running extension cords through the wall out to their deck, or things like that. Yeah, I mean, doing things like that if we only did it at turnover, I'd be concerned we'd be missing some of those things that the occupants are actually doing to that space, not just the management, so.
So, Chief and Mr. Forsland, first of all, I want to thank you for a well-written background report that got to a lot of issues. And when you identify all of the work that goes into this and all of the stakeholders and the partners that we have with police and also with the management group that works with police, the community, the multi-housing community group that comes together. My sense is that that might be a group that we could utilize to get at some of the issues that has been raised. So getting people involved, because that's how we also got to our rental licensing fees and the time, and those owners that engaged with us. We're here to do all of that. So first, I want to thank you for that, and also that the data that you presented helps us to understand what's been going on before we had the rental licensing program, and how many civilian injuries we had and firefighter injuries, and also there were fatalities. And then when we got to the rental license in 2012 to 2016, we didn't have any fatalities. And I do know some of the multi-housing fires that we've had. One on Aldrich that was very difficult, and also some of the buildings that have had ceilings in their garages, underground garages, falling down and damaging cars within those facilities. So, and then just looking at your concern, and I really appreciate that you're saying relaxing the standards to multi-family housing licensing has a risk of decreasing the effectiveness of the current program. And then I look at all of the data that you presented to us with regard to the Market City rental program, and that you tell us that our program has been a model that others have looked to and asked to duplicate. Edina follows our model, and that's but you look at all of the other market city rental programs, and some of the ones that don't have one is because they're pretty new. Their housing stock is pretty new. And just going through all of this, and I appreciate that you as staff have said that you don't recommend the change to the 6 years, that what we're going, well, the change to 6, because what we're doing here, as the chief said, the effectiveness of the program is working, and we're getting at it. Tonight, there were more issues raised by council members with regard to how can we do this better? How much enforcement tools do you need if that's the case? But one of the things that I really appreciate is that you really identify not only the safety factors, but the social factors and the cultural influence, the economic factors, the environmental elements, and so on. So you've done a very comprehensive look at all of this, but, and I appreciate that because this talks to us about a lot of things, but there are some areas that council members have raised with regard to how can we add more tools into your toolbox to make it work even better and not punish those who are doing well. Because I know there are some that do very well, and there are some, because of changeovers, a lot are REITs, a lot are absentee landlords, and to your point, you have to find them. And then who's the decision maker, and how do you really get them? I just remember Willow Pond and how difficult that was. And then you still have another one that's just within, well, it used to be Connolly Estates, and it isn't, but it's in this little pocket of townhouses, and it's still a problem. And it has an absentee owner, and the landlord changes often. You know, it's behind a gas station in that little pocket. You guys know which one I'm talking about. And I've gone through that and have seen how difficult that is for some of the tenants. So I thank you. I thank you for your recommendation, and it appears to me that there are some things that we will continue to work on, probably, but I would, you're the professionals, you know all of this. What's the best way? Working with the managers in that multifamily housing group that meets. And I don't know, do they still meet quarterly? And Chief, are you a part of that? I know it's police, the community.
I think we're doing it twice a year now. And most of the folks who show up are regular attendees. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, sometimes.
Yeah, and they're the ones who are engaged and are well-informed.
Yeah.
But it's the ones who don't engage and are only in our community 2 to 3 years, and then they leave.
And again, a lot of them are new managers.
Yeah, and they're not invested.
That's the turnover.
Yeah.
And we will, you know, we expect them to be here.
Yeah. Okay, Councilmember Workman.
Thank you. I'm speaking for myself, but I'm not prepared to make a decision tonight on this. I think there's a lot of things that we need to figure out. And listening to everything I've heard, it sounds like there's some desire here to be more favorable to our property owners that participate, that don't drain city services and maintain safe buildings. In reading our background, there was a newspaper article, and there was a quote from the Municipal Affairs Office from the Minnesota Multi-Housing Association, and they reference a tiered inspection system. And so in doing a little bit of research with some help, there's a City of Minneapolis tiered and rental license renewal billing, and I'm sure this probably exists in many other communities, and I'm not saying we copy one, but maybe we look at finding something tiered, like Councilmember Keeley is kind of searching for, and Councilmember Schultz, where we figure out a way to kind of accomplish both goals of getting after our bad problems and then maybe, I don't wanna say rewarding our good, property owners, but, maybe lessening the burden there. So I don't know if it makes sense to kick this to an all-day, so we can
It is.
do some more
It-
homework.
Yeah, I think there's more to be done here. Councilmember Keeley.
Motion to reject item 5C, ordinance amending Title 3, Chapter 28 of the Burnsville Record, and please send it back to staff to,
So
for
keep
us
it
to
still
discuss it all
as,
day.
keep the ordinance as it right now.
Yep, reject the proposed.
I'll second it.
amendment.
There's a motion and a second. Staff, are you understanding the motion? Yes. Okay, very good. So there's a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay, and the motion carries. We continue to operate with what we have, with the ordinance that is on the books right now. Okay, thank you. Members of the council, there are no other items to come before us this evening, and a motion to adjourn is in order.
Motion to adjourn to eat the Christmas cookies that were gifted to us by our city manager.
There is a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay, and the motion carries. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas.
Happy holidays,
Yes, Merry
and
Christmas.
thank you for being with us. We'll see you in the new year.